think about college Democrats, I can't help but think about myself as a college Democrat in 1968. And I realized what a significant, important event it was in 1968 when I was in our dining hall at Hamilton College in upstate New York. And I saw a very good-looking young co-ed walking down with her tray, and I decided I wanted to talk with this young lady. I wanted to decide what I could say to her that would make it memorable, that she would always remember me. So in October of 1968, I went up to a woman by the name of Christy Bell, and I simply asked her, "Are you a Humphrey or Nixon supporter?" So the first thing I said to her, she looked at me like I was nuts. She said, "I'm a Humphrey supporter," and I said, "Good, then we can talk." If she were here telling the story, she would say that it is also good because if I hadn't been a Humphrey supporter, she never would have invited me back to Iowa, and I wouldn't be the governor of Iowa. And that's probably she also saved me from a fate pretty close to worse than death, I think, because at the time I was dating a young lady and was attracted to another young lady by the name of Mary Beth Garber, who ended up being the sister-in-law of Rick Santorum. So I got saved. Generation, your leadership can challenge the foreign policy of this country and can suggest that there's a better way to approach foreign policy. A way that starts with a moral imperative that the central purpose of foreign policy should always be the protection of this country and the elimination of war and conflict around the world. And you can do this, and you must do it. You are the generation that can challenge this nation to develop a more competitive domestic agenda, one that strengthens the economy, one that is based on innovation and creativity, one that doesn't tinker with the education system, one that doesn't give us a nation of standardized test takers, but is a revolution in education so that every young person has the capacity and the ability to be as creative and as innovative as God intended them to be, starting with early childhood, strengthening the K-12 system, and making sure that there is no young person in this country, regardless of their circumstances, that is ever denied a college education or the ability to finish a college education because they can't afford it or they can't borrow any more money. It is your generation. It is you, the leaders of college Democrats around the country, that must challenge people like me to develop an environmental ethic that recognizes and appreciates that indeed global warming is real, we are contributing to it, and we can prevent it. The fact that our country, the most powerful country in the world, has chosen to take our way or the highway approach in foreign policy instead of being a great nation. We are a nation today that people fear, and we should be a nation that inspires people. And people are anxious and worried about all of that. And Republicans have used all of those anxieties and fears to separate us, to encourage politics based on fear, because they know that if politics is based on fear, fewer people vote, and Republicans win. They know that if they can separate us based on religion or race, sexual orientation or national origin, our positions on the war or choice, our positions about the environment or our patriotism, if they can separate us, then they defeat us, and they win, and they have power. And they're not taking this country where it needs to go. They're not taking it to a better place. They're not taking to a place that America was designed to be. And I will tell you that the folks who can change that, the folks who can change the direction of the politics of this country, and the folks who can change the direction of this country are right in this room. And it is really more about you than it is about people like me, because you have the power to do this. And I'm here today to challenge you and to ask you, and to plead with you to do it, because this nation can't afford more politics of fear. It is time for politics of hope, and I know every one of you believes in hope. Major movement in this country has been started by people like you. And that's why I'm here today. Because it's time to start another movement. A movement where we take America in a different direction. Where we have America be the leader it was intended to be as a world leader. And we have an economy that allows us to make sure that equality is not just an idle promise, but it's an American reality for all of us. These are not impossible goals for people who believe, in hope. If you can get yourself engaged in campaigns, if you yourself can become candidates, if you can embrace and acknowledge this movement of hope and take it to college campuses and to communities all across this great land, here in St. Louis, we can begin changing the direction of this country. Bruce was 42 years of age when he was called again by his country. He was sent over to Iraq. He left his wife and 2 children, this small town of West Liberty, and his job was to fly helicopters. And I can tell you it's dangerous, difficult duty. I was in one of those helicopters, mounted with machine guns, full armor. It's tough duty. One day, a missile hit his chopper, and Bruce had a split-second decision to make. He had to decide whether or not to put his life and his co-pilot's life at greater risk in the hopes of saving some of those on board, or perhaps put those on board at greater risk in the hopes of saving his life. Now, no one would have ever known the decision he made, but he made the decision you would expect him to make. He put his own life at risk, and that of his co-pilot. He died that day, and so did his co-pilot. But 18 people lived. My job was to call his wife. My job was to talk to the widow, was to express condolences and sympathies. I've given a lot of speeches and I've talked to a lot of folks. By far the most difficult thing I've had to do is to make those phone calls. 42 in all I've had to make. Well, I called this widow, Olivia Smith, and I started to talk about duty and sacrifice and honor, all the words you would expect me to talk about. And frankly, I wasn't doing a very good job. And I realized it. I stumbled around. This woman interrupted me, and she said, "Governor, I have it figured out." And I thought to myself, how could you possibly have this figured out? She said, "I have it figured out that those 18 men that lived that day needed Bruce more in that split second than I will need him the rest of my life." Well, I put the phone down after we finished the conversation, and I sat in my beautiful office, and I reflected on the fact that I'd been in the presence of greatness. It's the greatness that's defined by ordinary Americans who understand that there's a higher purpose to all of this, and there's a common purpose. Who understand that we're stronger when we're united and not divided. Who understand that we are better when we're hopeful than fearful. This was a woman who understood all of that and understood that there were sacrifices to be made. And while she was asked to make an extraordinary sacrifice, she was willing to do so, however difficult it was going to be for her, because she believed in the promise of this country. You know, when you talk to folks like that, you realize what a great country this is, that indeed nothing is impossible for us to do if we approach it with hope and not fear. So I'm here today, again, to ask you, to plead with you, to challenge you. You need to be the generation of leaders that lead this country to a new place and a better place. And it must be you. It has to be you. And I believe it will be you. Thank you very much.